Hallo und freut mich. As of the release of this episode, I am in Switzerland, getting ready to present at the Eurovox conference in Lucerne. I'll be presenting two sessions, one with my dear friends and colleagues Dr. Marissa Lee Naismith and Dr. Travis Sherwood, entitled Adapting Student-Centered Pedagogy Across Three Distinct Musical Genres, and another by myself, entitled Building Trust, Navigating Conflict in the Voice Studio. In the latter presentation, I share the following story. Early in my teaching career, I was working with a baritone who transferred into my voice studio. Prior to our working together, he had only sung in his chest voice, so we spent the entire first semester exploring balanced registration. He made great strides and was on his way to developing a head voice. When I asked him how he felt about his progress at the end of the semester, however, he stated, "Well, it's easier to sing, but I feel artistically dead inside." I assured him that he was still being expressive, but he would not hear of it. After the lesson, he went to the head of the musical theater program and told her that I was mentally and emotionally abusive in his lessons. This, of course, was not true, and he was transferred yet again to a different voice studio before dropping out of the program. While this is a very extreme example, it is a potent reminder that as voice teachers, we are messing with our students' perceptions of their identity. The freedom my students started to feel in his singing, while much more sustainable and wonderful, was also painfully dysregulating to him. I didn't have the awareness or language to speak to that issue at the time, and unfortunately, our collaboration ended quite poorly. Hi, my name is David Sisco. My pronouns are he, him, and you are incredibly welcome to my little podcast that could, Wholehearted Voice Pedagogy. This podcast is dedicated to the art and practice of teaching singers. It is an extension of my book of the same title, which was released by Routledge Press last summer. It's available on Amazon, Routledge.com, and anywhere you get your books. Today, we're going to discuss voice and identity. My very special guest is my dear colleague and friend, Dr. Belinda McMahon, PhD, who is an Australian voice researcher, educator, and singing teacher. The founder of Voice Print Professionals, she's also a vocal communication specialist. More on her in just a moment. But first, as we often do, let's prepare for our conversation with Belinda by considering how our voice shapes our identity and how that identity is, in turn, perceived by society. In the book Sounding Bodies, author Anne J. Cahill and Christine Hamill write, quote, "Voice is marked sonorously and politically by the fact that it emanates from a human body, a material entity comprising of multiple surfaces, cavities, textures, and physical structures of different densities, shapes, and locations. Moreover, that body is persistently situated within a specific political and social context." They continue, when it comes to the phenomenon of voice as human-generated sound, its embodied quality establishes its social and political meaningfulness. That is, it is a persistent, although by no means universal or exclusive, medium of human interaction, underscores its ethical relevance. Yet its materiality, its intersubjective quality, what we are terming intervocality, and its relation to identity all remain under-theorized, unquote. Through her doctoral dissertation, The Singing Voice and Vocal Identity, investigating the perceptions of and beliefs of singers and teachers, Dr. McMahon explores the influence of vocal learning, culture, family, performing, and community on the development of a singer and on his or her individual vocal sound. She notes that the development of our vocal identity is multifaceted and inextricably linked to the development of the self, which involves family and community experiences, self and social systems that impact motivation and engagement, validation or lack thereof, vocal learning experiences, both formal and informal, and self-concept and belief systems. So essentially, our vocal identity is shaped by numerous factors, projects a lot of information about us, and is processed by those who hear us, who make decisions about our identity through their own lived experience. And much of this phenomenon continues to go underexplored. For some reason, this makes me think of the 2014 documentary Do I Sound Gay?, in which journalist David Thorpe confronts his anxiety about sounding gay by enlisting the input of acting coaches, linguists, friends, family, total strangers, and celebrities. He quickly learns that many people often wish for a different voice. What starts out as a personal journey becomes a chance to unpack layers of cultural baggage concerning sexuality, identity, and self-esteem. While not exactly scholarly, it is absolutely worth a watch. All of this necessarily impacts our work with singers. In editor Rockford Sampson's introduction to the book Voice and Identity, which I recommend to you, he writes, quote, "The nature of voice training has changed dramatically over the last 20 years. And vocal pedagogy concepts that account for society's expanded understanding of identity have changed at an even more rapid pace," unquote. He offers asking a student's pronouns as an example. In the chapter entitled Practicing Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging in the Singing Voice Studio, my wonderful colleagues Dr. Elizabeth Ann Benson, Dr. Trinice Robinson-Martin, and Dr. Marissa Lee Naismith argue that the voice community has been very slow to decolonize the voice studio, noting that Eurocentrism and whiteness continue to hinder the way we encourage singers to engage with their vocal identity. It is now my pleasure to properly introduce you to my very special guest, Dr. Belinda McMahon, PhD. She's a voice coach, vocal communication specialist, and voice researcher with more than 25 years of experience teaching the singing voice. Throughout her career, she has helped hundreds of singers develop healthy, expressive, and authentic vocal technique. Her PhD investigated vocal identity and the factors that influence the development of our unique vocal sound. Today, Belinda works across both the singing and spoken voice spectrums. In the corporate sector, she helps leaders, executives, and organizations strengthen their vocal influence, while in her private studio, she continues to explore the powerful connections between the singing voice, spoken voice, vocal identity, performance, and human connection. Belinda, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, David. I'm really excited to be here and to see you again.
I know you're my New York friend from years past when you and your family lived in New York City.
I know, and I still miss those days. I still miss New York all the time.
They were great days, and it was great to meet your boys when they were very young, and now they're young men, as we were talking about earlier. And
That's right.
yeah,
I know, but no, they were fabulous years and they were very formative for me. But obviously enjoying my time back in Australia again too. A lovely spot to be as well.
yes, Sydney is wonderful, all times of year. So I've shared a little bit of your research in advance of our conversation, and so I just wanted to maybe start our conversation today by asking you what brought you to your research, what kind of got you interested about voice and identity.
Yeah, it was actually a very I think it's an interesting journey as it is when we start sort of watching other people as when we're older and it starts making us question our own development and our own journey. And that is what happened for me. So my background was, look, I've been a performer since a young age. I was on stage from the age of 7. Musical theatre was my entire childhood, and so performing in that. And then when I left high school, I went straight into professional work. I was fortunate enough to get straight into professional work, and which was a whole variety. It was corporate entertainment, it was cabaret, it was musical theatre, it was whatever work was around, basically, and whatever work I could get. And throughout all of that, I was also very strongly trained. I started vocal lessons quite young, especially for the time. I was only 12, I think, which was very young for the time. And that was because I'd actually had to have my tonsils out, and the ENT said no singing. Those days, I wasn't allowed to sing for 3 months after having my tonsils out. I think it was 3 months.
Wow.
And then he said, before you get started singing again, go to a teacher. But finding a teacher that would take a 12-year-old in Sydney in those days was very tough, actually. But we did find an amazing lady, Janice Light, who I'm pretty sure you've met, Janice, my lifelong teacher and mentor, and so fortunate to find a woman who just had such a passion and interest in voice science. And that really, I guess, shaped my interest. But anyway, so was a heavily trained singer, and had also had been performing all my life and working. Then it was actually, it must have been just soon after I had one of my kids, I think. I was doing some work at a university, and I was working with contemporary vocalists in a voice program in this university, and we were often marking these students. So I didn't have my PhD at that point, obviously. And I was just sometimes in awe of these 19-year-olds or 20-year-olds getting up and singing for us, and just having this complete sense of self about them. Some of them were just so grounded in who they were as a singer and what they wanted to sing and how they wanted to sing it. And other singers didn't have that. And that difference stood out to me. But then it also made me think of myself, because by this stage I would have been, probably in my early 30s, had sung my entire life and was very well trained and had my A+A, which is a diploma level in classical singing, and years of professional experience. But I didn't actually feel that I had that sense of who I was as a singer. Yeah, I didn't feel like there were these 19-year-olds in front of me that I thought knew who they were as a singer more than I knew. And I sort of got me reflecting on, yes, I was well trained, and yes, I had qualifications, and yes, I could work and I could be flexible according to what people wanted. But I'd never really stopped to consider who I was as an artist or a singer, or who I wanted to be. And retrospectively, I actually realised that significantly impacted my enjoyment as a performer. So I loved performing, but I never felt quite aligned with what I was doing. Again, this was retrospectively, I noticed by this stage I had a child and I was working more in the teaching area and not performing so much. And it occurred to me that I'd never really felt overly aligned with what I did as a singer and as a performer. So, I was working, I was ticking in the boxes. It was successful from however we call or mark success. But and interestingly, I'd had some vocal health issues throughout my performance time as well, which, were some technical things, definitely. But I actually now also reflect on them, think they were also sometimes because I was trying to make my voice be what it needed to be for other people, or what it needed to be for that job, or for that audition, or for that role, without it being fully aligned with what my voice was. So that's honestly where it all came from. It started out as, it just came to me from watching other singers and seeing them so aligned and just being in awe of them and going, so I'm older than them and I'm teaching them. And so why don't I have that same connection? What's the difference and where's it come from? So that's where it came from. And my research project before that, my honours project before that, had been in vocal constriction. And one of the things that came out of vocal constriction was the fact that often constriction is being caused by us trying to make our voice be something it isn't meant to be. And so that aligned with all of that reflection, and that's how I ended up in looking at this topic. So very, very driven by my own experiences and reflection of what I was seeing happening in the industry at the time as well.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for sharing that. And it makes me think of, the teacher is always the student too, right? I mean, we're always learning so much from our students and and how they can show up for themselves. And we're like, oh, why don't I do that? It's kind of amazing.
It is, absolutely. I think we learn so much from everybody that comes into our lives. I always say that, and I think that's just, we say it about our children all the time. We learn from the children, we learn from our friends, but I think we learn from the students as well all the time when we are open to watching them and reflecting and understanding that we've all had different journeys, and then considering how that is now impacting what we're doing right now.
So you set out to answer several questions through your dissertation, including how is the identity of the singer shaped? Is the identity of the singer relevant to singing and singing choices? How is vocal sound developed? And does vocal identity exist? And so with those questions in mind, can you kind of outline your research study and how you developed the research study to answer those questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So the study started with a questionnaire, so an in-depth questionnaire that went out to it was several hundred people. I can't remember the exact number now, but that was filled in by several hundred people, and that was getting people's perspectives on their voice, their development, how they perceive their relationship with their singing voice, and the influencers, things like that in their life. We were careful to actually often not use the term vocal identity in the actual questions, to try and not put preconceived ideas and terms into people's heads. But that's where it started, with a large questionnaire. And then the second stage of the study went down to interviews, so in-depth interviews. It was just with 10 singers then of different genres. And they were interviews, and those singers also did recordings. They also recorded 2 songs. Then from there, that was all obviously further analysed. And what we focused on in the interviews was determined by the themes that became prevalent from the interview questions originally, the survey sample. Then we went to as I said, the interviews and the recordings. From there, I then formed what we referred to as an expert listening panel. So they were people with a long history of singing teaching experience, basically, and they actually listened to snippets of the recording samples that we had. They listened to sections of that, and they rated that of what they heard. So they were listening for things such as listening to the tone colour and the warmth and the brightness and different elements of the voice. So we were analysing what they were hearing from the recording. Now, the terms that we used were drawn together from prior research such as Scott McCoy's work, where he actually used a lot of terminologies and those sorts of descriptors. But then we also drew the descriptors that we used in how people had described their voices in the interviews and or in the initial surveys. So it was like the descriptors came from previous research and then the themes that were coming out of my research. Then we took those recording samples, got the expert listening panel to listen and see if there was alignment in how people heard the voices and what they thought, and that this was not about a judgmental, it wasn't a judging it, it was just purely of, would you call this bright or would you call it dark? Is there breathiness or clarity? It was purely on just a scale of what they heard in the voices. And then the final stage, which actually turned out to be one of my probably the bit that I enjoyed the most in the end, was actually then taking those recordings and doing the recording snippets and doing spectral analysis on the recordings. So that was then looking to see, can we see vocal identity? Can we hear it? So, well, starting off, I guess, very perceptually at the beginning, what are people's perceptions on their voice, their vocal sound, the influences, the influencers, all of that in the development, then exploring that in more depth in the interviews with individuals, then taking the recordings, getting listeners to then, let's see how people hear those recordings, and then let's see then how people see how they heard it, and then let's see what it looks like on a spectral analysis to see if we could find overlap in there. And the very upshot of it all was, yes, vocal identity absolutely does exist, and yes, you can see it. You could actually see it in the spectrograms, but important to note that it's not constant. Vocal identity is not constant, just like our own identity isn't constant. And so I don't ever like anyone to think that their vocal identity has to be limited or restricted by where they are right now or where they've been, or it's not something where it went on in a box with it.
Wow, that's quite a dissertation. It covers a lot of ground. It's very
It
impressive.
was it was huge. It was huge. And I honestly, at this stage, I can't remember at the beginning if we intended on it having so many stages. I honestly can't remember that far back. I mean, I did some of it part-time, some of it full-time. So the whole thing probably went over 6-7 years. And by the time you do the amendments and put it through, it's as you know, any of these things, they're massive projects, and they morph and change over time as you learn more and you discover more. But certainly I actually think things from memory, the listener panel at the end was an addition that we added in as we were going through, because we realized, oh, hang on, now we need that external perspective coming in to try, and then the analysis, the visual analysis of spectrograms, that was so interesting. But you'll notice if you look at my thesis, we actually ended up deciding to take the images of the spectrograms. We had images in the actual thesis. We took them out of the publication that went public for privacy reasons. And that was because as I went through, I realized how much that image actually does identify a person's voice, and all of my participants were de-identified. So we made the call to take them out, to keep everyone completely de-identified, because that's how much we realized you could actually recognize somebody through that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing to me too, like I love the duality of, I was mentioning this earlier, like, how we express ourselves and how we see our identity, our vocal identity, and then how do others hear us and receive us, and where is the overlap in that, and how much is that influenced by the listener's own identity, right? That all of that is so juicy to me, and very layered.
It is. It is exceptionally interesting, and I do think we do sometimes hear things differently according to our own experiences. But I think mostly we can see that. Mostly we hear things similarly. It's just that the context is so as an example, somebody who is more classically trained may actually rate a voice as being breathier than a contemporary artist, where some more breathiness in the tone may be considered stylistic and appropriate to the sound that they're looking for, but not so appropriate. So I do think context matters, the context. And so we can hear these things, but how we then rate them may then depend on our experiences and the context that we're thinking is going to be applied in.
What were the main factors that kind of came through as influencing the development of vocal sound or vocal identity? And was there anything that you theorized would be an influence that wasn't supported by the data?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is where we have this little moment of realization of, what, singing teachers, we aren't necessarily the be all and end all, even though I might have thought we were. So I actually, I have to say, and I've got to be honest here, and this is, it goes to show how we can lose perspective of things. I absolutely went into it thinking, oh, it's the singing teacher. It's the singing teacher that really impacts the sound of the singer. It's how we've been trained, how we've been taught to shape the sound, and the techniques we're using, and I really went in thinking it was very strongly the singing teacher, and I came out of it going, oh, okay, we're just a very, very small little part of this whole thing. I'm not saying we're not important. Of course we are. And you know what? We actually are really influential. And as a singing teacher, it is important. But this is what I'll go, the model at the end, one of the models at the end came out with. We've got to think of it as the self. The self is being developed. The self is then being impacted and sits within the social. And then that person from the self and then impacted by the social, that then leads to actions, and the actions then lead to outcomes. I would say the singing teacher is sitting more in that social area in terms of the learning, and also in the actions, because it's actually what's happened in the self and the social levels that has then driven somebody to actually go to have singing lessons.
Yeah.
And then that goes from there. And then, of course, that spirals around, because actions and then outcomes then feed back into the self. And then it continues to, obviously, it does become cyclical there with growth. But yeah, now, whether I had that preconceived idea because I was a heavily trained singer myself, but because I guess probably because the position I was coming from was as a singing teacher. But so many other influences and influencers came through. And I think if so many of those don't happen a particular way, that person probably never even gets to a singing teacher.
It's such a good reminder of our role, and that, you know, that it's not just that of facilitation, but it's really, you know, guide on the side, you know, kind of work, where we're encouraging people to do what they already do in a efficient way, right?
Absolutely. And that all of those other elements, the self, the social, their actions, all of those are happening coincide or next to our teaching of that student as well. We can't take a student out of all of those things. So when we're teaching, we have to be considerate and mindful of those factors. So I'll talk about what some of those factors were that came through.
Please.
So family was a very big one. So family came through for several different reasons, from as simple as just the music that was played in the household when they were kids. Okay, and when they were young. As simple as, was it normal for somebody to sing around the house or not sing around the house? Were they encouraged? If that person wanted to sing around the house, were they encouraged to do that, or were they told to be quiet? That's too noisy. Be quiet. So it was everything from a family, from a household. It absolutely showed that it was very generational. Families that had long history of musicians tended to flow through, and even when it wasn't consciously done. And, you know, I can just relate this right now. I've got two sons, as you know. Both of them are quite happy just to sing around the house and just use their voices and be expressive in that way. That neither of them are interested in becoming professional singers or taking music anywhere in their life, but they're happy to be expressive singers, just expressive with their voice. Now, they've obviously grown up with me singing, having singers in the house all the time. My husband, Adrian, he sings around the house too. So it is normalised. Now, that is important to remember. It's this normalisation. That was a strong theme that came through. So now, as I was saying to you earlier, in my upstairs rumpus room, there's a microphone, there's a full sound system, there's a drum kit, there's a guitar. Now, I've never played, well, I could say I never played guitar. When I was 12, I tried for a little while and I was terrible. But... you know, I'm not one of these musicians that actually wants to pick up every different instrument and play. I've never been that type of person. But now that's one of my sons. It's a guitar this week, and then it's the drum kit, and then he sings, and he has friends over and they jam upstairs, and they're allowed to make noise in the house. They're allowed to be noisy. They played the drum kit so hard they vibrated a life fitting out from downstairs, out of the ceiling, because the drum it's going so hard. But we allow that here because music's part of our life. So that's just a real prime example of family experience, where other families may go, no, that's too noisy. No, we don't have that space. No, you can't do that here. Or even just not think it's normal. Why do you sing all the time? Like it's not normal for them, that use of expression. Obviously, then there's also support in terms of financial support and the support of actually taking children places. If somebody wants to do lessons, they need to be paid for, and they need to get there and back. So again, that's another element of support that really does help shape people. I know myself, my mother drove me to so many things and so many rehearsals. I was always rehearsing somewhere, so many nights a week or weekend. Now, if my parents hadn't been happy to support that, that might have completely changed my trajectory as a when I grew up later on. So support exposure to music, even things like going to concerts, going to a musical. Those types of things. Going to see the community choir or a community theatre production, but exposing them to those things. So listening came out as a key element. Again, what did they listen to? And we know, I'm pretty sure this is Graham Welch's research, but Graham Welch has written about the fact that a baby is born with a predisposition already to liking certain sounds. So the baby's already born with that. So I know, and isn't that insane? Like, we're born like that. We are born liking, say, consonants over dissonance. Now, this is especially in Western. I would like to say this is obviously my literature, and my research was looking at Western cultures. So, and this can explain why we have, because different cultures can have different musical sounds, as you would well know, because I know you're doing a lot of work in different areas. So, and they can be different sounds, and and they're used to it. So, things like a beat being in time, that sort of that standard 4/4 beat, and a major key, and consonants over dissonance, those sorts of things we can already be born liking. But it can be even more than that. It can even be the style of music, because if the mother is listening to music and feels good about it and likes it, the baby gets that. When in that third trimester, gets that emotional reaction to the music, which blows my mind, but is amazing, and I love it. I think it's amazing. So I really think we shouldn't underestimate all of those very early life experiences that are happening every day. Are we singing in the car with our kids, or aren't we? Are we putting that music on and encouraging them to sing along, or are we telling them to be quiet? It's these little things that actually can be really significant. Yeah. Even if the family is not musical themselves, they can still allow that musicalization and in the household. So, and my research showed this, but so has other research, and the research at the moment is escaping me, but there was other musical identity research done that shows that people often underestimate or devalue the importance of early life experiences.
Yeah.
So we often will tend to get to a stage where we go, even I probably could have easily say, oh, but I just always loved singing. I always wanted to be a singer from a young age, and it was just quite natural for me to be on stage, and I always enjoyed it, and blah, blah, blah. And that is true. That is true to an extent. But I know my mother used to sit at the piano and play the piano to help me sing from a very young age, because I wanted to do that. I had relatives who were quite musical that was exposed to. They found me a musical theatre community group to be in at the age of 7. And now I can tell you, I've seen the recordings of my first videos, my first performances, and I was not naturally gifted. I can tell you. In fact, I didn't make it into the Year 1 choir at school, apparently, the first grade choir. I don't know what I did wrong at the audition, but I didn't make it in. So, yeah, but I liked being on stage, I liked singing, but I wasn't necessarily good at it from the beginning. But several years in, it could be very easy for me to go, oh, I just did it and it was natural. But no, I kept working at it, and I kept getting given opportunities, and people kept supporting me. Yeah. And then people kept giving me feedback that made me feel good about myself. So that reinforced my belief system. And, this is where, when we're talking about the self is, what are our beliefs? And then our beliefs impact our actions. And then the actions then form habits. And, and so that's, when we're talking about the self, there was even just a lot within the self. So, so within the self, it's all of that. But then it's the social. So the self sits within the social, in terms of the self is developing within all of those social factors, the family, and so other social factors can be community theatre, choir, churches, okay, and then learning, but learning can be formal and informal. And so learning could be formal lessons, but it could also just be a great teacher at school helping the class sing along well and learning how to do something. It could be the, the math teacher that's been asked to run the choir. So they're not actually a singer, but they're trying to help people, be expressive in that way. Like it's not always the structured formal learning that you and I would probably think of,
Sure.
because that's what we're very exposed to and it was very normal for us. But, that would be part of it, but that's just a part of it. So, yeah, I guess in summary, we go the social, family. The social areas are family things. It's community, it's churches, it's choir, it's formal and informal learning. And it's all of these things that then help normalise singing or impact somebody's perception as to whether singing is normalised. It impacts what style of music they're hearing and listening to. And remembering that we're all natural mimickers, we mimic what we hear. So what we're exposed to continually does start to shape how we will use our sound and create our sound. And then all of those experiences are shaping the development of the self. It impacts the experiences the person has. Those experiences impact their belief systems. Then from their belief systems, that impacts their actions, basically what they do. Actions then start to become habits. And before we know it, we're just a 20-year-old or a whatever-old just going, oh, yeah, I've always been able to sing. I've always loved it. I've always been good at it. It's just something I always just wanted to do. I've just, my family's a bit musical too, I guess. But, I'm just... and we don't necessarily consider all of these really influential experiences earlier in our life.
It makes me think of, we're coming up, or I'm coming up on going back to school, end of August, beginning of September, and thinking about initial assessments with students and, asking certainly about like, their background as a singer, but also asking about their background with music and
Yes.
their voice and identity. So you're giving me some really wonderful things to think about as I think about that initial engagement with a student, and to get them to think about it too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's right. Getting people to think about where their voice has come from. What have been the influences and influencers in their life, positive and negative sometimes. And now, why don't we don't necessarily want to stir up bad emotions for a person. Sometimes we can understand that there may have been an experience that has really made them very scared of a particular sound or using their voice in a particular way, or they may really hold a belief. How many times do we hear singers say to us, oh no, I can't sing high, or or I can't do this, or I can't. And sometimes these are young singers and they're already very much holding that belief. And we talk about, there is research out there on that singer non-singer dichotomy that we have in our world. And we do have that very strongly. I know we do in Australia, because we're not a culture where singing is normalised. We're not a culture where we all just sing together. There are some families who may do that. But this is why musical people, well, they said to me in the research anyway, they would often go looking for churches or choirs or community theatre groups because they were looking for places where singing was normalised. And that's because a large part of our culture, if we're out in Australia, and I'd imagine it's the same for some parts of America as well, I'm not sure, but it's not normalised for everyone to sing together. So that, just even understanding that, does the student think that singing is a normal thing, or do they think it's a little bit different and can only be done in certain places? Their perception of whether singing is normal or not, or like whether they've grown up with it being normalised, often flows into whether they want to practice, if they feel comfortable practicing, where they practice, how they practice, if they're comfortable with people hearing them. Those things I sometimes find after I've been working with someone for a while and I start to realise, that the practice isn't happening the way we would like it to happen, that there are often reasons for that. There are, when we start to unpack that a little bit, again, and then similarly, reasons for the way they want to sing at a particular place or not. If they, what type of music they want to do, what they think they're capable of singing and not capable of singing. So much of this is caught up with that. So I think as teachers, yes, we are very important. And sorry, don't take that out of context. Sounds horribly
That's going to be my takeaway. That's my takeaway. Sorry. I'm very important. That's all I heard.
So yes, exactly. Don't take that as a soundbite from me. Sorry. No, as singing teachers, we are influential in their journey.
Sure.
We are, and I think it's really important for us to remember that and be respectful of that. Be really respectful, and it's a privilege. It's a privilege we have. You said, walking alongside them. That's what I think. We walk alongside these students. And that's what I love about working with students, is that we get to know them well. We do get to walk alongside them. We get to walk alongside them for their triumphs and for their disappointments, and help them navigate these things. And it's about us helping understand their voice. So yes, we have the technical side of it. Yes, where we do want them to be able to sing with healthy, repeatable technique. We want them to be able to sing in a way that is going to ensure they're looking after their instrument. And in my opinion, I want my singers to be able to use their voice to express what they want to be able to express. That's what it's about. I want them to be able to make the sounds, the tonal colours, just use their voice in the way they want to be able to use their voice. So for us to be able to help them do that, yes, we know that there are very specific techniques that we can use to help them with that. We can guide them with, as you said, vocal conditioning, vocal training, vocal health and care. There's all of that. But I think as a group, as singing teachers now, I think we've moved away from, and I think this is a good thing, we've moved away from having such set expectations of what is right and what is wrong. And I think that is really important, because I think that actually sometimes deters people from wanting to learn to sing and wanting to ensure they are having a healthy, repeatable technique that they're using, because they are worried that their vocal identity is going to be taken away from them.
Sure.
They're going to be forced to sound the way the teacher wants them to sound or thinks they should sound, rather than being able to be expressive with where they're at. So I think respecting the fact that we're basically respecting their vocal identity, respecting their history, where they've come from, where they're at now with where they're at, and encouraging them to continue to explore and develop to end up being the expressive singer they want to be with their instrument, to tell the story they want to tell. Now, yes, we know that they do have to fit into a box sometimes, a box for a role, or a box for a job, or a box for an audition. There are sometimes there are elements things we have to do. You and I both work within university systems. We have to mark. And we have to mark to a rubric. So we have to be able to tick boxes. And that's probably one of the most conflicting parts of my job ever. I don't know about you, but I find it the hardest part ever is the marking, having to put somebody's, breathing into a box on a rubric or their expressiveness to put it into a box and a rubric. And I understand this is what we do have to do in working within a structured education system. But I just try and make sure I'm always balancing that with helping the singer understand how that can fit in with their own voice, their own goals and expression, and then how we can try and juggle the two. Basically, where we can try and juggle exploring the self and being a free, expressive singer, whilst also meeting the demands of either an education system or a job or an audition or a role at the same time, and trying to find that balance. And my hope is so singers, they can feel aligned when they're singing that role, even if that role is a character role, it can still feel aligned with their voice. Because I think that is more beneficial for the singer, not only emotionally and from a satisfaction point of view, and I think it's also better from a vocal health perspective as well, for vocal longevity.
It makes me think, the rubrics that we have to fill out. I take that same rubric at the end of each semester, and I adapt it for my students, and I have them do a self-assessment
Yes.
using that rubric and say, tell me how would you grade yourself based on this? And then I look at that and I take what I had initially written down and look at what they have and try to meld that for the final version. So I'm really trying to come at it through the lens of the student, and
Yes.
their particular goals, right? Because that's what I hear you kind of speaking on really powerfully.
That's right. They have different goals, and it's different now. It's not the same as when we were all trained classically, and mind you, I can speak to plenty of classical singers my age now, and there were classical singers in my research that honestly felt like their voice had been pushed and pulled way too much to meet the demands of what the expectations were. They were told early on, you are this, you are going to be a dramatic soprano, or you are this, that, they were categorized very early, and they didn't necessarily feel that that was actually correct or aligned, and that it was vocally and emotionally exhausting.
Yeah.
And when we talk about burnout, or we see burnout in people. And I'm actually going to say this statement I'm about to say comes from the lovely Dr. Veronica Stewart, V. Okay. And V and I, as you know, we did our PhDs together and we're good friends. And we were talking recently about burnout, and that's something that she looks at a lot. And she said to me, she feels burnout is when what you're doing isn't aligned with what you want to be doing, or who you are, or what you genuinely think your purpose is. It's not necessarily just that it's too many hours or too many songs or too many whatever, that it's the lack of alignment. So I credit that to V, that statement, and I think it's wonderful. And I think she and I were actually talking about it in a different capacity, but personally I think we can apply that to singers in the same way, that if we can help them feel aligned vocally and with their intent and their goals, then they're expressing their identity. They can know who they are. They feel aligned with all of that, and then things can flow better. And you, lovely David, has said to me, I don't know whether you said this to me in person or whether I've seen it online from you, but I know this was you. You said that when we're teaching singers, we're just teaching them to release the tension. We're teaching them to release tension so the voice can express itself, can come out. Now, I'm probably misquoting your exact words, but that's how I remembered. You said something along those lines. Would I be correct that that's a philosophy of yours? Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. And I don't know when you said it to me, but honestly, it stuck with me forever. That's always with me. And I think when we can put this concept of alignment and vocal identity and then releasing tension, if somebody is aligned, then they're releasing that tension. We're helping them find that, and we're taking those layers off, the layers of this bad experience here and that bad experience there. We don't need to go delving into those bad experiences. Instead, we just want to make them feel safe to explore new positive ones, and let's give them those positive experiences going forward, and creating those, and really making sure. So validation was a massive theme that came through actually as well. Validation. And so the positive validation really significantly impacted people's long-term trajectory, whereas negative validation was very negative, as you would expect. And how that impacts the voice and vocal identity, it's that if we get positive validation, then A, it impacts our belief system. oh, I'm good at this. I'm going to do more of this. We put ourselves forward for roles. We go for the choir. We go for the role in the musical theatre group. We ask for lessons. We do lessons. We grow. So basically, we believe in ourselves. We keep getting this positive validation. So we continue to believe in ourselves. And we then put ourselves, that's where it then, so self and social, then going to actions and outcomes. It then drives the actions that we do, that then drives the outcomes, that then goes back into that whole self and social circle again. That's right. So if so that validation is so important. And as singing teachers, we are part of that validation process of helping them develop the belief system that they can do it. Because we all know a singer that doesn't believe in themselves and is full of that mental tension, where does it manifest? Right here, in the throat. In the throat, in the body, in the breath. So that was the other thing that came out very clearly in my research, is that it's the psychological factors have a very direct physical impact. So it's physiological. So psychology and physiology, they're exceptionally linked. And we know that, but that really came through. We've all experienced it in our own voices and our own lives at different times. And anyone working with younger kids, that whole singer, non-singer thing actually comes in very young in life. So it's around, I think it's around the age of 9 or 10, there is a shift, could even be a tiny bit younger. Yeah, but I think, let's say 9, around that age, there's a shift in the development in our brain where we shift from believing we can do anything and we can learn anything to we start to think we have to have been born able to do it. So from singing, we could easily understand this could shift from a kid's just singing loudly and freely and doing anything to suddenly they're at high school and they're like, oh, no, I'm not a good singer, I can't sing. And that's that shift, and there's this window. So I think people who work with young kids in any capacity, in music, in teaching, in any capacity, in families, helping us establish this idea that they're a singer, that everyone can sing, that singing is just an expressive way of using our voice without all these judgments of good and bad.
Yeah.
You know, and that our society puts on people, and we have reality TV shows where people sit at home and laugh at people singing, giving it a go. And it's like there's kids watching that, and then they're going to be scared to use their voice because they see people laughing at somebody who was just trying.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know? So, you know, there's just so much that we could unpack here. But yeah, it's such a hefty topic, vocal identity, and I love it. All of those same principles are the same in spoken voice. And that is where I spend a lot of my time now, working in the corporate world. It was probably 50-50, 50% singing voice, 50% corporate voice at the moment. And in the corporate world, helping people just be more expressive when they're communicating, understanding how influential their voice is. It's not about presentation training. I'm literally working with people in sales capacities or leadership or managing teams, team collaboration. We're talking about how the sound of their voice impacts how people react and respond to them. And that all delves into an area that I know you love. It's the autonomic nervous system. That's what it's all about. And our nervous system reacts to the sound of a person's voice within 500 milliseconds of hearing them speak. Within half a second, we are making judgments on somebody's trustworthiness, competence, their intelligence, value judgments we're making on a person in half a second, quicker than the brain can process the words. So, which is really, really interesting. But I do see, and this is where my two worlds collide, I can see that people who have done some level of performance or singing or acting or something in their younger years, as adults in the corporate world, are often far more comfortable being an expressive, confident communicator than other people where their communication and their voice is often significantly holding them back in their career because they're not comfortable to sound confident. They don't know how to sound confident. They're not comfortable with that expressiveness in their voice. So, you know, the work we're doing in the music area and the industry and with singers, it's so much wider reaching than we often consider it to be. Look, I think in short, David, the saying I use, if I was to sum up everything, you know, the 6 years of research, the 100,000 word, you know, dissertation, all of it, all the blood, sweat and tears, I think it comes down to this one statement, and it is, our voice is a snapshot of who we are as individuals. It represents all of our life and learning experiences and our emotional reactions to those experiences. And I think that's really important to remember. It's not just the experiences, it's actually how we have experienced those experiences.
How we process them or not, maybe
Yes.
even.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. That's right. Exactly. And then because it's those that then often impact the next thing we do. Because it's that then impacts our belief systems, that impacts our actions, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And on it goes. So it's, you know, and it shows us in such a beautiful way, I think, how we are all so influential. We're a small part of something much, much larger, but our small part is important.
Yeah. My God, this was so fantastic. I knew it would be a great conversation, having read some of your dissertation and knowing you as I do. But thank you for bringing your passion and knowledge to this and getting us to think. I just thought you would not only be a perfect person to talk about this subject, but also as we, you know, those of us in the States who are getting ready to go into a new year, and think about how we're thinking about our students' voices and how we're getting them to think about their own voice, is so powerful, and goes and hopefully then grounds the work, the technical work that we do.
Absolutely, that's right. The vast majority of our time with a student is always on technique. But this is about how do we deliver that technique? How do we deliver the instructions? How do we then respond when the student is doing things? How do we deliver our feedback for the songs? How do we encourage them to explore that song in a different way or explore their voice? It goes hand in hand. And I think if we could do it as a diagram, it's two things. We've got vocal technique and we've got vocal identity. And they're two separate components, but they overlap. And in the middle is what I refer to as holistic vocal training. It's when we're considering it all more holistically, rather than as being individual components, because they're not, they're intertwined.
Belinda, thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time. I really appreciate it so much.
So I just want to say thank you for getting me to do this. Whilst, as I said, I work with singers every single day and I'm working in the spoken voice space in vocal identity. I'm thinking I'd love to get some of this out more into the singing research area again. So maybe over the coming years, I'll get out to more of those conferences again and and share this information, because I do think it's really, really valuable and just can help us all.
Absolutely. Well, I look forward to that very much.
Lovely. Thank you, David. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. In the chapter from Voice and Identity I mentioned earlier, my colleagues Elizabeth, Trinice, and Marissa make several recommendations that support a student's ability to safely and freely explore their vocal identity, including the following statement of inclusion. As it pertains to music, my voice studio is a safe space where you can fully express yourself without fear of being made to feel unwelcome or unsafe because of your current skill level, personal vocal sound, musical heritage, or musical preferences. We will respect and honor each other's unique voices in order to build a strong community and sense of belonging for all. What a great statement. And What a great reminder of the care that we must daily practice in order to make the student feel safe to explore their authenticity through the music they sing. What has come up for you during this episode? How has your vocal identity been honored or challenged during your own training? What tools might you engage from this episode to encourage students to find their literal and figurative voices? Sound off. You can email me at wholeheartedvoicepedagogy@gmail.com, or you can find me on the socials. My handle on most platforms is @Sisco Songs or @Wholehearted Voice Pedagogy. I would love to hear from you, sincerely. Come back again, okay? You are very welcome here, and I love sharing these discussions with you. Until then, more soon. Take care of you.